Emperors and Exiles, Chapter 10, Books of Summons. The Library of Broston, like most ancient buildings, was old and expansive. Tall bookshelves stood in lines that gave a person just room to walk through them. Shelf after shelf ran in rows, with arched passages to allow one to move from one aisle to another. It made it feel almost like a labyrinth of knowledge. In the back of the great hall was a reading area with a number of long, narrow tables. Here, a few mage lamps were glowing, giving light to read by around the clock. Oil lamps and candles simply could not be risked. It was likely that eventually, even in libraries, Jerome would ban mage lamps, simply to burn them down easier. The smell of the library reminded Orion of his childhood at the monastery. He had feared the room but loved it. Once upon a time, he had loved study. He'd hide up on the balcony to read, waiting until dark to slip out when no one would be around. He'd try to get to his room without incident. Too often, he would study and write his reports with great care, only to see those reports in the mud. After so many times, he lost the desire. Most often, those reports were knocked out of his hands by Jamie. He sighed, shaking the past away. He had hated those years, and most all of it due to Jamie. Jamie had been everything Orion had not been. The blond boy had been stunningly handsome, brilliant in class, gifted at everything he tried, and sadly, a very cruel bully. Jamie had hated Orion. Orion had been the rich, fat, red-headed boy with glasses that the poverty-stricken bully took all his anger out on. Most of Orion's adolescent years had been spent bruised, suicidal, and hiding from Jamie and his friends. Orion had forgiven him a long time ago, but it had not been easy. Orion walked the aisle of the library, not really looking for anything exactly, just letting his mind wander. He and Jamie never spoke of those years or of family. It was rather like the year that was lost. They just never spoke of it and put it behind them. Maybe if he understood what had happened, he might have talked to Jamie about it, but he just didn't remember. Orion still looked through crowds for faces of people he could not remember clearly. He woke from dreams, missing people without names. If only he could recall those names and faces, it might be so much easier. Reaching the end of the aisle, he went to a table with a book already there. It was a great tome, leather-bound and dusty. Clearly, the table was its home. It was massive, and it was spell-locked. Curious for a moment, he slipped the lock open with barely a thought, careful to hide that he had done it, and opened the book. He nearly laughed. It was a book of stories, standard childhood stories, yet the pages were stunningly painted in fantastic detail. Each had the well-known lore, followed by facts and true events, often with references to historical tomes. There were also short stories on the different heroes, and following each story were the facts about the person and interesting information. It wasn't hard to get lost in the book, even though he had heard all of it before. He was reading when a man entered the study area. Orion glanced up as one of the men sent to watch Orion entered. Orion put that face to memory. He wouldn't overlook him again. It was not the man from the inn, he knew that much. This fellow had made the mistake of revealing his face. Orion would know him anywhere now. Pretending not to have noticed, he returned to the book and its entertainment. A moment later, an altar boy brought in a wooden tray with a cup of tea on it.
"Your tea, Father,"
he said, as he set it on the table beside Orion's chair. Orion looked up at the young man. He was average-looking, but he had the feel of one who is older than he looks.
"The book you asked for,"
he said, offering a black book that was rather small but thick. It was a copy of the writings of St. Augustine. He bowed as Orion took the book.
"Thank you,"
Orion said, not really sure what was going on, but not about to play ignorant in front of the man who was in the room watching him.
"Keep it as long as you wish. The bishop has several copies and would be honored if you had one."
"Thank him for me when you see him. I may not get the chance to."
"Of course. Good day, Father."
"Good day,"
Orion said, closing the large tome. Leaning back in his chair, he opened the book in his hand and found that it was just a cover of the saint's writings. It was not the writings of Augustine at all. He flipped through the pages, slowly turning them, as if looking for a passage that he would have taken into interest. It was a book of summons, a very illegal book of summons. The book was so old the pages were yellowed, and the writing was in Imperial Pertan. The language was once the common language of the people of Pert. Now it was all but dead and lost. Only priests and wizards still spoke it, and fewer could read it. He felt uneasy even holding the thing, but someone wanted him to have it, and he suspected it was Gallus. He closed the book and sat a while with it in his hand. He took a few sips of tea, then rose and left the library. He walked slowly back to the palace, letting himself take on the limp that was natural to him. His spine and left hip had a stitch to them that he hid well most of the time, but now he let it show and allowed himself to look older and more helpless than he truly was. His back ached, his bones ached in places he could not recall injuries happening, and today he felt old. He knew that he had been seriously injured in that missing year, but even with the help of Jamie, there was nothing to be said or learned or eased. He was stuck with it. He was met at the gate by a young woman in men's clothing. She wore a sash across her chest that marked her as a letter carrier.
Father Orion?
She asked.
Yes?
This is for you. Would you sign, please?
She held out a book as well as several letters for him to sign for. They were in a bundle that had been forwarded from his chapter house to here. He thanked her and turned toward the palace with the bundle under his arm. He didn't open any letters until he was in his room. He took a seat at the table and untied the string. He began to go through the letters and to quickly read them. Most were long overdue invitations to events, some as the grandson of Lord Hennon, and some as the famous hunter, Father Orion. He scribbled out a few apologies for politics' sake. He just wished people would stop inviting him places. One was a letter from his brother, saying that he was engaged to be married again, and he would like Orion to perform the marriage. It was 2 years old. Another was telling him that his cousin had died. There was a letter from his father that was, as always, lecturing and complaining about Orion having abandoned his family and his home, that it wasn't natural, and this and that. It was all the same things for all of Orion's life. Only one letter caught his eye. It was beautifully written, an invitation to Awans from the Crown Prince himself, Theradon Lords. The letter wasn't old, but the date to come was several days past, and for whatever reason he felt a pang of loss and regret. He'd have to write the prince back and apologize this time sincerely. He leaned back in the chair and slid Theradon's letter into his inner vest before he tossed the rest of the letters aside for whatever servant to pick up and go through. He let his annoyance settle before he opened the book that had been sent to him. Inside were much better sketches of the summons rings. Orion assumed it was from the constable. He took out the sketches and looked for details, then began to flip through the book from the bishop to find anything that might line up. He was halfway through the book when he came to a folded letter.
I need to talk to you. Meet me at the Goblin's Pot, after dark as soon as possible, and hide this book.
Touching the letter, Orion knew the book was not from whom he had thought, but someone else who had a good idea what was going on. This book was from someone who risked a great deal to own it. He set the 2 books aside and looked at them. How had he gained 2 different books of summons from different sources in one day? He felt very uneasy, and as if someone was setting him up. Those 2 books would need to disappear and be kept far away from him. Should the church catch him with them, he'd be excommunicated and put to death, or worse. Orion swore under his breath, got up from the table, pocketed the books, and left his room. He would miss dinner, but that would be all right. He could explain well enough, he supposed. It was almost dark, and if someone needed to talk to him, he was not going to miss it for a formal dinner that he did not want to go to anyway. He could feel his followers as soon as he left his room. He took a slow, limping pace out of the halls, into the church proper, stopped to pray a moment, then went out the main doors. He was a hunter and had been trained to hunt and to hide. He had been hunted by vampires and demons, and this game was little more than child's play. He could have slipped them at that point, but that was too easy. He did not want them to know he had slipped them. He would lead them into the city, then vanish on them. It would not be that hard, and he might well get a better look at them. The markets would still be open and busy this time of night as people got their last tasks done for the day. The trick he used was simple enough. He rounded a corner, pulled up his hood, and stood up against the wall. When the follower came around the corner, Orion cast a little flicker of energy onto a man going into a bookstore. It was just enough to make a tail have his attention put to the bookshopper. It was often enough to make the tracker think the flicker of energy was his target. The man, the one from the inn, moved across the street to take a seat and wait. Another man joined him, the one from the balcony. They spoke a moment. The second man went up the street to cover the other direction. Orion turned, going back the way he had come. He had seen them, but not much better than he had before. He was known to be a great hunter, and yet few noted he was also a wizard. Even if he wanted to deny it, he knew he was a powerful one. He also knew things he could not recall learning, and had found himself using magic often in small things, ever since that year. Everything seemed to go back to then. He pushed it out of his head and focused on the moment. He knew where the goblin's pot was. It was down near the port and overlooked the harbor. The usual customers were ship captains and less rowdy merchants. It was designed to be private and safe with several ways out, but only one way in. An old place dating back into the imperial days, the goblin's pot was well taken care of, had a menu of food options, and a wall of drink choices. Orion kept his cloak around him to hide the robe he wore under it. He hadn't been able to change clothes, but the cloak he had was full and long. Choosing a table, he sat down near the fire and wondered if he was reading a note that was not even to him. Here, he was alone, without having told Jamie, and with 2 very dangerous books in his pockets. This was madness and not safe at all. Orion was about to leave when a man slipped into the chair across from him. He was at least half Persian, decidedly handsome and very well dressed.
I'm glad you decided to come,
the man said.
I can't stay long, so I'll talk fast. The things that are going on are far bigger than you have any idea. What I know is that it is a master summoner. The bodies are not what are being used to summon, but are a blood price. There is something that is being prepared for, and the bodies found are the energy that will be used. When that much power is released, it will be very, very bad. The Archbishop has been working hard to frame me, and I know that it is only a matter of time. I have done all I can to learn what I could. And I am very scared for what they are doing. I have never heard of any as strong as what these seem to be. They are shielding at a level that hides everything as it happens, and have this city shielded as well. It is like nothing else I have ever seen. I cannot even begin to get word out, and I cannot hope to escape. All I can do is this.
He smiled warily.
The best I can do is get word to you that it is not me. I swear to every power above and below that it is not me. There is an evil that is building here. I do not know why or who, but it is big.
He looked at the door.
Put your hood up and leave as soon as you can.
He rose and slipped toward the back door, darting for it as the front door opened and guards moved in. Orion bowed his head, let them pass, and went out the front door. He was far more troubled now than he had been before. He had no idea who the man was or why he would talk to him, but there had seemed to be no hint of deception in him. Orion scowled and picked up his pace. He made his way to the park and sat on a bench in the churchyard. He pulled out the books and set to hiding them. He would keep them in plain sight under a simple spell. He layered on 2 illusions. If the first spell was broken, the illusion of it being a book of prayers, it would suddenly change to being pornography. It would explain why he might wish to hide it, and the second illusion was very strong and very well made. He figured that would make the searcher stop searching. He just hoped the illusions he created for it were not obviously made by a prude priest instead of a worldly pirate. He was still on the bench when the Archbishop walked up with an annoyed look.
You missed dinner.
Orion looked up as if startled. He squinted at the old man in the near dark of the yard. He reminded Orion of something, but he couldn't put his finger on it.
What?
Dinner. You missed it.
Oh, Your Grace, I am so sorry.
He looked around the yard.
I lost track of time.
He rose to his feet.
Please forgive me.
And what is it you were pondering here for so long?
Orion shook his head.
I was lost in the past, recalling the many scars I have. I'm afraid the weather here is rather hard on me. So low to the ocean, the pressure is much heavier and my bones ache.
Even with James as your partner?
If not for James, I would be dead.
Orion half laughed.
I am, however, very scarred.
He made himself take a step with clear pain, putting his hand on his hip with a wince.
I was going to ask you on a little vampire hunt. Seems we found a man who has been in hiding, but I would not have you worry of it now. I would not endanger your health.
Orion smiled a little. He wanted this man to see him as weak and not a threat in any way.
I am sorry. I truly feel my age these days. I'm afraid I am a constant drain on James at this point. He suffers for that drain, and both of us feel the years on the borders. If you need any advice on the matter, though, my mind works well enough, I suppose.
If you like, I could assign you an aide,
the man said, watching Orion with an odd expression.
That is very generous, but I am a stubborn man. I would rather do it myself and suffer than have someone help me,
Orion said a bit ruefully.
Maybe that is why I am so scarred,
he admitted.
You should at least come in and soak in the hot pools.
Orion nodded.
I think I shall after I find a bite.
He laughed a little to try and further reassure the higher-ranking man.
Again, I am so sorry for missing dinner.
I shall see you in the morning then?
Orion bowed his head, feeling sick to his stomach. He wanted to kill that man. He wasn't sure why, but he had to clench his fists against punching him in the back of his head. The Archbishop strode away, leaving Orion to the garden again. He had not even sat or decided if he was going to go find food when Jamie was there.
There has been another one,
he said in a low whisper, not even stopping in his walk.
Let's go.
Orion stepped back into the shadows of the wall and moved after his partner. They did not exit using the gate, but with several finger holds, went up and over the wall itself. They took a moment to make sure the street was empty before they dropped down to the smooth pavement below and moved with a quick pace. Seeing the move, no one would have thought them to be old nor priests. They were, however, too good to be seen and slipped away like shadows. Jamie led the way, knowing where to go to meet the carriage that the constable had sent for them. It was one of his own, driven by one of his best men. They ducked inside and the carriage moved forward at once. End of Chapter 10. Continue with Chapter 11.